All right, Richard, are you good to go?
I am as ready as I'll ever be.
Nice. So I see we've got people streaming in, so let's just give it a minute. Can you see the attendee list as people are streaming in here?
I can see 21, 23 participants now. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, we had 50 some odd at the last one, so maybe just wait till it gets up somewhat close to that number and I'll let you take it away. I will just drop into the background here.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
I'm here if you need me.
Thanks. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Men's Shed presentation. It's 7:01 by the tower here in Grande Prairie. I just would like to start with my own brief land acknowledgement. My name is Richard Nisedkin, and I live in Grande Prairie in northwestern Alberta, which is Treaty 8 territory. And I grew up in Treaty 8 Fairview, which was the home of the Beaver Indians that were pushed out of the area so that Fairview could settle. And they moved to the Duncan Reserve, and the reserves in the Grande Prairie area are the Horse Lake First Nation and the Beaver people, the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, and the Sakika community. And I'm really looking forward to continuing reconciliation through the rest of my adult life. I'd also like to make a brief comment about gender, and I'd like to acknowledge that it's not my intention to be focusing on men specifically, but this is a love letter to men. And when we talk about men's sheds and men participating in the shed, it's anybody who identifies as a man. And we are open to anybody that's 18 and over at our men's shed here in Grande Prairie. The Grande Prairie Men's Shed is a welcoming community, and we have a workshop of about 1,350 square feet, and it's based on woodworking. But we also have a book club that meets, and it started just at the beginning of the pandemic in February. Before the pandemic started was when I started my shed, and I used some radio interviews, and back then we still had a newspaper, and we had 20 guys showed up, and I was going to meet once a month at the same coffee shop. And after the very first meeting, it was shut down because of COVID, and then we had to wait another 2 years before we could start anything else from there. In November, my business, which installs railings on decks, I was looking for a space, and I leased a space that had enough room for a small shed at the front. So I was the founder of the Grande Prairie Men's Shed, and I self-financed it. It cost me about $5,000 to renovate the shop so that there was a designated space. But as soon as we had the shed running, some donations started to trickle in, and there was a lot of community support. Over the next 2 years, we worked out of my business, and then the Resource Center for Suicide Prevention paid for a space that is right next door, and that's where we're currently located. And they're paying for the lease. It's about a $24,000 per year commitment, and everything else is being self-funded. Once we got started, we received an $11,000 grant from a group called the GP 100, and we also received $10,000 from a local business that was celebrating their 60th anniversary, and I earmarked the money for us. Currently, the Men's Shed meets on Tuesday nights from 7 till 9 p.m., Thursdays from 11 till 3, and then Saturdays from 11 till 3. This table saw there is the money that we spent from the GP 100. We bought a saw. We also have a book club that meets at the men's shed on Thursday nights from 7 o'clock. There's about 3 guys that attend that right now, and we're hoping that the shop will be open as well as the book club. So we're just trying to expand it as we go along. There's a couple of pictures of what we started with. The opening lobby just had some seats that were out of my 12-passenger family van, and there was an upstairs that had a kitchenette. But what I was finding was that the guys were standing visiting in the front area, sitting on those van seats. And this is the space that we started. It was the shed, and the men's shed movement started at just before the turn of the century in Australia. And men's sheds in Australia were literally sheds in parks where new Australians could meet senior Australians. And the concept was that men don't tend to make friendships, and the new Australians also had a cultural shift from living maybe in an apartment in Japan to renting a house in a small town in Australia, and then all the yard work that would come with it. What they found was a lot of the new Australians formed their own community groups, and the senior Australians really found a benefit from the men's shed. And in Australia, there's thousands of men's sheds, and they're supported by their national health program. They're also quite popular in the UK, once again, because there is a bit of money from their health services program. We put a little kitchenette in the upstairs of my shop. That's the photo on the left. But with the new shed, we've put the kitchenette on the main floor. And one of the biggest contributors is a local coffee company that provided us with a older analog style coffee machine. And as soon as we run out of coffee, we just phone them and they drive the grinds off for us. And there's some guys that say, I just come here for the coffee. We've also we picked up a shuffleboard, and we've got a large family table that was donated. Lots of sitting around here and lots of visiting is what's taking place at our shed. Typically, we get 10 to 15 guys at a meeting. So on Tuesday night is our busiest night because that's when we started. We have quite a variety of ages, which is what makes our Grande Prairie men's shed a little bit unique. Lots of men's sheds are my age demographic. I'm 57 to the 75-year-olds. Our oldest guy is 82. Our youngest active guy is 24. And then we have about 4 guys in their 30s. So we've got quite a wide range. We also have 2 or 3 members from the LGBTQ plus community. The one thing that's really common in guys that join men's shed is that they do have time on their hands. They either are newly retired, they're on a long-term disability of some sorts, or they have a job that is out in camps. And so when they're in Grande Prairie on their days off or during downtimes in the oil field work, they're looking for spaces to hang out that maybe isn't a pub. What we're seeing with the guys that are showing up is there's a massive shift towards friendships. There's a lot of support. One of the guys that joined the men's shed commented that when I joined the men's shed, I had 1 friend and now I have 5. We're developing a lot of mentoring. There's some guys that have joined that are journeyman carpenters that are tired of making boxes. One guy made custom cabinets for most of his life, so he's really not interested in being on the tools. But boy, does he perk up when he has the opportunity to show either a retired accountant or a 25-year-old how a particular tool works. Really, the emphasis of men's sheds is just like some of our previous speakers earlier this week talked about, is that we're sitting around shoulder to shoulder and visiting. We're maybe not looking face to face. I have one story where there was a guy that joined as a truck driver from Ontario, moved here for the extra income of the long hours of truck driving in the Grande Prairie area. And while he was working on his project, one of the other guys started asking about where he's from. And over the course of the next half an hour, they both stopped working. They were leaning on their projects and visiting and talking about the difficulties of having adult children and the types of ways to support adult children compared to little kids. I think one of the crucial things that's important in a men's shed is having projects to work on that are community based. This is where people really start to get excited about being at the men's shed. We're working on a sign. We had this huge timber donated, and we're carving out Boreal Wetland Center, and we're going to be hanging this up for Ducks Unlimited this spring. And so this is something that really caught a lot of people's attention. And one of the guys that helped with the letters is actually a graphic designer. And so he was really happy to be able to transfer his skills from working on a computer to something that was a little bit more tangible. This is what the space looks like from the front. And we have our mission statement on the window. And we're on a main thoroughfare in an industrial park. I think it's a really good location because it has bus access, it's got wheelchair access, but it's also not downtown because we're not a social agency. If you think about people that are having mental health issues like a river, and maybe suicide or mental health crisis is a set of waterfalls on that river. What the men's shed is it's way upstream in the creeks and the tributaries. And men's shed as a movement is building up resilience in men that are just realizing that they need a little bit more help. It's not a social intervention program. How to start a men's shed? I think the most important thing in starting a men's shed is meeting consistently. I was meeting every Tuesday night for 2 years in my business. I was letting people know on Facebook was my primary medium. Offering food is also really important. I think just having cookies or muffins and even some bags of chips. I don't get too worried about exactly how healthy it is or not, because one of the things that if there's only 3 guys and there's that awkward silence, then you can start opening the bag of chips and defer that awkward silence into something that's a little bit more hands-on. Location does matter. I think you need to be in a space that's accessible, but isn't necessarily across the street from the homeless shelter. The men's shed, as much as it is about community and about building friendships, we're all volunteers. So if we are dealing with people that are in a crisis of homelessness and the like, it can be a little bit of a distraction. And I think it's really important that you keep things simple when you first start. Coffee, cookies, and a table, and being welcoming. Basically, a men's shed is a formal version of anybody's A&W that's in any community across Alberta. In Fairview, we called it the Senate. There was about 12 guys that would meet at the A&W and visit over coffee. I think what makes the difference between that group and the men's shed is that we try to focus the conversations a little bit off of the political spectrum and a little bit more onto the friendship and community service spectrum. The Alberta Men's Shed can help people start up a men's shed. So if anybody who's listening is thinking, oh, this might be something that my community would be able to use, Alberta Men's Shed, we have brochures. We can come in as a guest speaker. We can do online video visits like this presentation. And I think before you even start, you really want to know your audience and know exactly who it is that you're wanting to bring out to these men's sheds. The Grande Prairie Men's Shed is very unabashedly pro mental health. So I think we get an awful lot of diversity by doing that. And we also get a lot of guys that are coming out wanting to help other, like they're feeling like they've gone through a lot and they have a lot to share. This is the brochures that we have that we can offer. We also have some posters. Typically a shed that gets started, there's 4 different kinds that can start. The informal group is like I just described. If you can find a space, maybe in the Golden Age Center or a community group, having coffee, muffins, maybe if you're knowing your audience and you're looking for seniors, you'd be meeting during the afternoon. Lots of seniors don't like to drive at night because of night vision issues, but they do have time in the afternoon. Maybe at a 10:30 or 11 o'clock start. A lot of seniors also have naps, so a 2 o'clock time isn't necessarily that good either, but so you just have to have an idea of what you want to be doing. The formal nonprofit would be the next step. So that's when you're registering as a nonprofit society. You have a board of directors, you have a bylaws and the like. My Men's Shed is a sponsored group men's shed. So the Suicide Prevention Resource Center will receive any donations and people get a CRA tax receipt with that. But they also have a bit of a thumb on making sure that the dollars are being spent specifically for the men's shed. So it gives us a lot of credibility really quickly. Lots of FCSS groups in the province. So Edmonton and Calgary aren't necessarily branded as FCSS, but the small communities, family community support services, or maybe there's a nonprofit like in Edmonton, a community group like say the Blue Quill or Ritchie community groups might want to sponsor a space. So those are the kinds of the 4 ways that you can get a shed started. But really what you want to focus on is that making that connection. So this gentleman here made 40 bird feeders, and he's donating them this spring to a local dog rescue society, and they're going to be selling them off as a fundraiser. So this is another example where we've been helping with connection. Some of the barriers, the harder parts to get a men's shed started. The crucial thing is having one champion. So for Grand Prairie Men's Shed, that was me. You need to have that one person that's willing to make sure that the doors are opened every Tuesday night or every Thursday afternoon. And that one champion needs a cheerleader. So the Valley View Men's Shed started and they have the one champion. The cheerleader is the FCSS person in the town of Valley View. Some of the barriers is to insurance. Alberta Men's Shed Association is looking to find a sponsor to pay for a group insurance plan. Lots of places won't even provide you a space unless you can provide an insurance certificate. And those certificates usually cost about $1,000 to get one shed having insurance. Another barrier is constitutional. So once you do have a group of guys, you need to decide how you have a member, who is a member. If a member is misbehaving, how are you going to deal with them? So bylaws, procedures, things like that. And then in the larger centers, the space. So the space that we're renting costs about $3,000 a month if we were to rent it as a business. And sometimes it's really difficult in Edmonton, for example, just to be able to get a space. A lot of the small towns can get a space quite simply, but it's harder to get the members. So it's almost a triangle of the space, the members, and the bylaws and the procedures to make sure everybody stays welcome. Men's sheds have to be grassroots. They have to be the guys that are making the decisions of what they do. So there's some men's sheds there's one in Calgary that does bicycle repair, and then they give away bicycles to disadvantaged youth. There's a men's shed in BC that just specializes in doing puzzles and games. Ours is woodworking because I have a woodworking shop teacher background. And I feel that woodworking is a really easy one to get introduced to, and the tools aren't that expensive. But women are also key. I think it's important that you have a woman or two on your board of directors or on your focus group. And it's women that are going to be sending the guys to the men's shed. So it's not that we're excluding women, but at the actual meetings, they're discouraged from being there. And I often get asked, well, what if a woman shows up at the shed and wants to join? We would welcome them and we would show them around and we would tell them about it. And we would ask them if there was any men in their lives that would need this fellowship and fraternal experience. And most of all, keep it simple when you're starting. You don't have to have, you don't need a fancy shop with fancy equipment. It can literally be guys bringing their own tools and building picnic tables for a local park. We've often talked about safe spaces, and I like to think of a men's shed as a brave space because I really feel that we need spaces for men, and it was talked about earlier in the week where they can come together and just be who they want to be. And we, as Don Ritchie from Australia, who was supervising the Gap area where there was a lot of suicides in Australia on Wednesday night, his name was brought up. And what he said was, we need to do more talking. And so the men's sheds is really a safe space. And I like to think of it as mental health by stealth. we have a space where a guy can show up and we can promote it as a way of either they can learn woodworking or they can teach woodworking to other people if they have that experience. But really where the magic happens is the guys having the visits while they're piling wood or while they're cutting up wood for a project. One of the things that's the most awkward, I think, in science is the phrase that you can't prove a negative. And so you really have to have a lot of faith that the men's shed is going to make a difference in these guys' lives. And I've actually physically witnessed it. One example I have is an 82-year-old guy brought a birthday cake to one of the shed meetings, and he did it. He got me to unlock the shed ahead of time. He brought the cake from the co-op that had happy birthday written on it. And then he had his friend from his senior citizens residence come with him to the shed, and we celebrated a birthday cake and sang happy birthday for him. And I think that was probably the first time in that man's life that he felt he was in a brave enough space to be able to tell his friend that he appreciated him and that he wanted to celebrate that birthday party with him. I appreciate Miss Peter's comment about the GP Boys Choir and that sense of fellowship that the Boys Choir instilled in those young men, and then when they went to Edmonton as young adults to sing in Edmonton. And really the whole purpose of men's sheds is to be able to allow guys to just be. And there's no need for bravado. There's no need for one-upmanship or anything like that. And it's really interesting to see how behaviors change when there are women present. And it's not that it's like a locker room mentality, but the guys do tend to tense up. And I'm sure, like some of our speakers have talked about other reasons like emotional abuse, physical abuse, shame, addictions, all of these other things, that it just seems that the men's shed allows them to just be. And it's really a really neat experience to be in it. So that ends my presentation. I was trying to be under 25 minutes, so I think we're right there if there's any questions or anything.
Oh, where did my camera go? I think my battery might have died. Thank you so much, Richard. I'm going to go flip my battery and I will be right back.
Well, while he's doing that, Help Age Canada has some grants that will allow people starting up a men's shed. You can get up to $10,000 once you have a group that have been meeting on a regular basis. And then that's last slide that I showed had my email and my phone number. Please reach out and give me a call or drop me an email, and I'll gladly help you along. There's about 6 guys that meet throughout the province. There's a shed in where our president is in Cold Lake on the east side of the province, and then mine. There's a number in Edmonton. We're working on our way into the south, and we're going to be in Medicine Hat very soon doing a presentation, and we also have an online presentation on the 27th. So there's lots of support out there. Just reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much, Richard. That was great to hear. I just love. It was funny. Somebody actually today said to me, you know, they're doing this thing in Australia that sounds really cool. And I said, oh, well, if you hang around for a little bit, you might find out about what they're doing in Canada. That's really cool. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, friends, we've got about 5 minutes until our next presentation. Fran is going to talk about the fly in, fly out lifestyle. And you touched on that, eh, Richard? You have some camp folks up there, and it presents some unique opportunities, but it also presents some unique challenges.
Yeah, that's right. And we get a lot of truck drivers that join because they have too much screen time, and it's not iPad screen, but it's windshield screen. So they're sitting in a truck all by themselves, alone with their thoughts for extended periods of time.
I did open up the chat now, so if anybody just wants to send a quick note, they can. Sorry about that. Folks, I forgot to open up the chat, so I will make sure I do that for the next session. And yeah, I'll leave, Richard, you can hang here for the next 3 or 4 minutes. If anybody wants to message you, they can do that. And I am going to hop over into our next session. Once again, Richard, thank you so much for coming out and all your care and attention. I really do appreciate it. I know you put a lot of effort into this. We practiced this a couple of times, so that was fantastic.
Thank you. You're very
and no
welcome.
hiccups. All right, friends, we'll see you over in the next session.